Hey everybody, how is everybody doing? Welcome to the second week of Fermentation February. Throughout this month, I'll be talking to people about fermented products, whether it's for their business or personal use, and telling you about my personal fermentation evolution. I wanted to talk about this evolution thing. This podcast is about people's personal food evolution, about showing that we all start somewhere. I was such a picky eater as a kid. I didn't like rye bread, or I thought I didn't. I didn't like fish sticks. Even when I married Brett, I could not tolerate spicy food at all. Like spaghetti with black pepper was too spicy for me. But through patience and dedication and appreciation of what others found enjoyable and, people walking me through that, like what flavors to expect and what I'm looking for in this and what they appreciate, like literally walking me through a meal, I was able to appreciate the flavors. I've learned. Now I can eat spicy food. So my evolution was slow and it took a lot of time and a lot of things affected it along the way. The point is to talk about those pivot points in people's personal food evolution and let you know that it's fine. Wherever you are in your food evolution, that's totally cool. We're all inspired by different things at different times. And my hope is that maybe something on this podcast will contribute to your personal food evolution. So back to fermentation. Over the years, I have pickled a bunch of stuff and experimented with a bunch of ferments. I have a lot of books on fermentation, but my favorite, maybe even my first, was a book called Wild Fermentation by Sandor Katz. You can find interviews and videos with Sandor where he talks about how his book came about, but it kind of reminds me of the style like the Moosewood cookbook assembled from notes and letters to friends. But his book was published at a perfect time, right when the science was coming out about the gut biome and all the information about how good fermented foods were for you. And it just rocketed his book to popularity. And he's written a bunch of books since then. He's got a video series on fermentation around the world where he travels and talks to people. It's really lovely. And as Trevor says in this episode, Sandor has been the inspiration for so many people to start fermenting stuff. In grad school at Chatham Food Studies, we had a sustainable fermentation class, but by then I had already experimented with kombucha and kraut and yogurt, so I decided to apply for Sandor Katz's workshop at his farm in Tennessee. It was a whole application process, and you had to write an essay and get selected, and he only selected like 13 or 14 people for those workshops. And he picked me. I was so excited. And it was an amazing group of people from around the country and one person from Canada, I think. And I'm planning a Zoom reunion to talk about that time. And I'm going to make that into an episode. So I'll save any stories from that time. But I can't wait to see everybody and hear what everybody is up to in their fermentation evolution. So today you're listening to my interview with Trevor Ring from Community Cultures. He makes all kinds of fermented products and sells them at the Bloomfield Saturday Market. I've had his kombucha, but he also makes krauts and naturally carbonated sodas and miso, which, if you didn't know, miso takes years to make. Well, the processing is done in an afternoon, but then you have to let it age. You have to let it ferment, and it can take some time, and the longer the time for ferments, the better they are. I'm looking forward to his, he's got a 2-year batch of miso that's almost done. I'm looking forward, hopefully I'll get some of that. But I hope you enjoy this conversation and then go visit Trevor at Bloomfield Saturday Market on Saturday. Welcome to With Bowl and Spoon. I'm here today with my guest, Trevor Ring from Community Cultures. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. My name's Trevor. I have a business called Community Cultures, as you noted. I've been fermenting food for almost 15 years, and essentially my business started as a hobby, I think as a lot of businesses do, and just 2 years ago, I formed it into an LLC, and a year ago, I quit my full-time job. So I've been doing this full-time now for a little over a year. And Community Cultures sells fermented products. They're small batch, locally sourced and foraged, and I make them all myself. And I also teach people how to ferment all sorts of food. So it's kind of a two revenue stream business. There's the education component and the product component. And right now I'm in like more of the education's season, mainly because you can't really source that many ingredients locally, and there are fewer markets, so it's kind of obvious to like have a seasonal job where, in the colder months I'm teaching, and then in the summer months I'm making products and selling them mostly at the Bloomfield market, and hopefully soon I'll be expanding a little bit.
How'd you get started doing fermentation?
So in college, I had a lot of gut issues. I got stomach aches all the time. I also had a background in food, so right out of high school I went to culinary school, and I was like interested in cooking, but I didn't necessarily want to be a chef. I learned more about agriculture eventually, kind of shifted to learning more about sustainable agriculture, and naturally I learned how to preserve food, and I learned how to make kombucha. And around that time, this was back in the days when they used to card you for buying kombucha, because they didn't know if it was technically alcoholic, since there are traces of alcohol. But when I would take like a strong shot of kombucha, my stomach aches would go away within like 5 minutes. So that was kind of the gateway for me. I call kombucha my gateway ferment. And from there, I just started getting interested in fermenting all sorts of other products. It really like grabbed my attention. And since I was interested in like culinary and agriculture, but knew I didn't want to be like a chef or a farmer, kind of found it to be like the perfect in-between where I could express myself through food and also learn more about nutrition and kind of embrace all these other aspects of this like very specific form of food preservation.
Are you mostly self-taught through books, or have you done like workshops?
So I haven't done like necessarily like extended formal training in fermentation, but I have worked under like Sandor Katz, the like fermentation enthusiast that most people are aware of in regards to fermentation. And I've taken like some workshops here and there, but it's mostly been exploring on my own. And the more I learn, the more books I buy, and the more I'm intrigued by like different products that I haven't heard of before. So I would say like in the first couple years, I learned through Sandor Katz, both in person and through his books. Usually like he's the gateway into fermentation for most people. And then from there I just started teaching workshops, and that kind of naturally happened too. Like I never thought I would want to be an educator or a teacher. That was never like a dream of mine, but I was just so excited about the information and I had to share it with people. And then people were very receptive to it, and a lot of people have lost touch with this form of food preservation, so there was like a clear opening for just educating people about it.
You grew up in Maryland.
I mean, honestly, there isn't a whole lot to share except that I was like a suburbs kid who didn't really experience much of like nature or a connection to food. I didn't really have that until I went to college, which was in the Adirondacks in New York. And I was like immersed into the wilderness, kind of like developed a love for nature and food around the same time. This is like getting away from Maryland, but eventually I studied abroad in Italy. That helped me realize how disconnected Americans are from their food system. I feel like very like aha, like kind of typical moment going abroad.
Yeah, Europe will jack you up for the States.
Like,
you're just like, what is wrong with this?
Right. And then I wanted to learn more about agriculture. So yeah, that kind of brought me closer to like fermentation and the importance of food preservation. But I mean, I guess going back to like my family, so my mom grew up in Western PA, and most of my family like comes from Europe or Eastern Europe. So before my grandmother died, I learned that her mom was making sauerkraut and lacto-fermented pickles, and of course my grandmother didn't learn how to make those things, and my mom hated sauerkraut. So like that lineage wasn't like passed to me, that connection to those specific ferments. So naturally, like when I learned about that, I felt like very connected specifically to like sauerkraut and lacto-fermented cucumbers. And I like to share that story as a way of using fermentation to like connect to our ancestry and like where we came from, because every single culture around the world has some fermented product, and I think it's a fun way to explore like where we came from and how people were preserving hundreds if not thousands of years ago, because we didn't have like pressure canning and all these other methods of preservation that we have now, freezers, etc. So, and I think especially like being in Pennsylvania, where like there are so many routes to Eastern Europe, and a lot of people don't know how to make these like pretty simple products, and so it's fun to like kind of bring that back to this region too.
We're in Eastern Europe.
So like Slovakia, but yeah, mostly like my great grandmother came from Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, that's cool. That's where I'm from. My
cool.
family's from too. Let's talk about what made you want to ramp this up to an actual business if it has sort of destroyed any of the joy.
Yeah. No, good question. When I started like diving deeper into fermentation and learned from Sandor Katz, I was living at an intentional community in Western Massachusetts, and I created a fermentation CSA. It was for like the community members. I think there were like 20 people who were part of that program. So like twice a month, they would receive an array of fermented products.
So page right out of Sandor's book.
Yeah.
I mean, not literally his book, but out of his life story.
Yeah, exactly. And I had so much fun with it. People loved it. There was more demand after that moment, and that's when I like started to teach more workshops, but also like people would ask for like certain like fermented products that I was making outside of the CSA, because I did the CSA for one season, and then just didn't have the capacity to keep going. So I worked for many different fermentation businesses. I worked for South River Miso in Western Massachusetts for over 2 years, so I have like a lot of like hands-on experience, but like doing very monotonous work. And having worked for like a lot of value-added product businesses, I recognize like that's not for me. Like if I knew that if I started a business, I would want it to be like seasonal, have variation, that I don't want to ramp up. I don't want to sell to Whole Foods. I don't want to like really sell to like many markets and have to do the monotony of like just producing a regular sauerkraut in order to like get it on the shelves and sell it to people. So the goal of my business is to find the sweet spot where I don't have to grow that much. And that's partly where like the education component actually kind of offsets some of the costs for my business. So I can go to the farmer's market and I can make very small batches of fermented sodas, which is one of like my specialty products that we can talk about more. And I can source like very seasonal, local, and even like spend time foraging ingredients that often like doesn't result in like much profit, if any at all, but it's a passion. And I like knowing that like I will lose the integrity of the product if I expand too much. And I won't be able to produce certain products if I expand too much, because there's only a certain supply that I can get, or I can only forage a certain amount of ingredients. So that kind of holds me in check a little bit. So that's kind of like what I'm walking right now. I'm trying to find like that balance between the education and the products, not scale up too much, but like scale up enough that I can sustain myself. I really like that I can't expand too much, and selling at farmers markets and directly to customers is the ideal for me, especially like my fermented sodas, for example. So I use like wild fermentation and water kefir as the starter cultures to initiate the fermentation. And in the summer especially, they can become like kind of volatile in that they can quickly become overly carbonated. So there's an education component, and I wouldn't be able to sell some of my products on the shelf in a grocery store, because if somebody took it home and opened it, it might explode, especially if it was sitting on there for like more than 2 weeks. So,
or maybe be alcoholic.
Right, exactly. For the health department, they don't want that. So I give those products a 2-week shelf life, and every bottle that I sell to my customers, usually I know how active they are. I'll tell them like, hey, be careful, like open this one slowly, carefully.
Outside.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely like kind of honed it in a little bit more, so I'm having fewer explosions than I did at the beginning. But the good thing is like my customers also know that, like sometimes you just need to open it slowly and prevent it from overflowing. And you can't have that kind of
I think that's a good approach for all things carbonated.
I agree. Yeah. But I use the glass flip top bottles, and a lot of people, when they open them, they just want to like point it away and open it like that, which is fine. But for my products, like if you don't want to lose any, you should probably open it slowly. Maybe open it over a bowl if you want to.
Don't be a hero.
Right, exactly.
Don't try to be fancy.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean it's fun, but also I know the limits of the products I'm making now, and I can't expand that much.
So yeah, what does that look like as far as I want to say a career?
Yeah.
In this, I guess you're looking to just live well, not drive fancy cars or
definitely, yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. I want to be able to save money, obviously, and like sustain my business. And so talking about like maybe short-term goals, like this year I'm planning to do another farmer's market, and I might hire like a farmer's market assistant or a manager to run that market. So like slowly increasing my production, and I sell my sodas out of kegs, and I'm trying to like make efficient processes so that I don't spend that much time on like jarring or putting everything in bottles beforehand.
Bringing back the growler model.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with my growlers.
I do have like customers who will show up with their own bottle, and then I can just fill their own bottle, and then I don't charge them for the bottle. And that's great. So I think people appreciate the recycling part of it.
Oh, for sure. That's, why growlers started.
Yeah. The other thing is I can produce like small batches of other products. So I do fermented sodas, but I also do small batch of miso, fermented veggies, and I try to like highlight local ingredients. So for instance, for the miso, I'll try to get local beans. Like B. Wilder grows some beans sometimes, even Weatherbury. So there isn't anyone, one, there's no like miso business in Pittsburgh, and two, no one is using local beans. Naturally though, I have to like price them pretty high in order to cover my costs. But I think people recognize that like it's a specialty product. If you want like a cheap batch of miso from the Asian grocery store or any natural food store, you can get it for under $10, but mine's priced at $18 or $20 for like half the amount because a lot of labor goes into it, and also it's locally sourced, so it's naturally expensive. So I definitely have like kind of a niche market for some of these products, but I'm like developing my customer base to the point where I definitely think that just by selling at farmers markets and maybe at a couple like retail stores, I can sustain that part of my business. And whatever losses I might have, the education component can fill in for that. When I worked for South River Miso, like the amount of mold that I scooped off the top of these vats was incredible, and I was like fascinated by the ecosystem of the mold. But people have no clue who buy it in the grocery store, and everyone's scared of mold, but like they don't know
that. If it gets a little speck of mold on it in the refrigerator, they're like, oh, throw it out.
Yeah. I mean, that's the part of like the education that I try to focus on, just like Sandor, is like we have to like debunk all these myths around fermentation and microbes and what's considered safe. And sadly, like so many people are scared of bacteria. So I try to kind of bring back this relationship with microbes that most people don't have, and recognizing that like a lot of what we consume daily, whether we know it or not, is fermented and probably had mold on it at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Was skimmed off.
I don't know how our population got to be so big on this planet with so many people that are afraid of. Well, you know what? I think it's just America. I think it's just the United States.
Yeah, it's definitely like a Western
and the rest
perspective.
Of the world is like really accepting or more accepting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we are unique in that respect. But I think it's becoming more common because of industrialization, and that people don't have to rely on fermented foods as much too. But at the same time, there's like this reinvigoration of people who want to embrace fermentation and learn more about it, like the sourdough craze that happened during the pandemic.
Yeah, I saw somebody who posted recently about like, oh, they bought a sourdough starter from a mail ordered, and I'm like, you just put flour and water on the counter for a day and it's bubbly. Like,
mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely like that. Yeah, that barrier between that knowledge and, I mean, like I think it's great if you want to like buy a sourdough starter from somewhere that is accessible, but you don't need to.
What if it was like someone's great grandmother who smuggled it in her, in her boot from Eastern Europe,
or like on her handkerchief or something. Yeah, like a dried bread that was just with them. Yeah.
Okay, so since you are an expert in this field, I'm interested in the idea of the bacteria, and so you sell kraut that you make it wherever you make it, and we can talk about that later. Yeah. But you also do classes, because the bacteria that I have this opinion that when you ferment in your own environment, that bacteria that's in your environment is going to be more like you, and so when you eat it, it's going to be more healthy for you. So I want to buy your product, I want to support you and your business,
right? But
also, if I do it myself, I'm getting that good bacteria that is in my environment,
right,
and helpful for me in other ways. Can you talk about anything about that?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point.
I'm not even sure what my question is. Go.
Right. I mean, I think there is definitely something there, whether there's like any research on it. I definitely believe that eating like the local microbiome could be healthier for you than like consuming the bacteria that are coming from across the country, or maybe that's what you need, the bacteria that's from your local cabbage or something, and from your apartment or your house, and what's in the ecosystem. Yeah, I mean, like, maybe if you're consuming the same microbes, that you're missing something else that could be from soil elsewhere, or that's living on cabbage or some other ingredient. So I think there's something there, and whether or not like we actually learn enough through science, I think that's really hard to study. And that is like what's lacking, I think, in the fermentation world. So most of the research is going into probiotic capsules and like isolating strains of bacteria and yeast, and you can't patent sauerkraut, and you can't patent like a lot of fermented products to the point where you're able to mass produce them. So there's less money going into researching them, but we can just turn to history to know that like this is healthy and good for us, and forming a relationship with fermented foods, I think, is one important way of like reinvigorating that relationship with food, but also like microbes that we need to like have a healthy immune system to live healthily. I think there's definitely something about getting used to microbes, whether that's through like food that hasn't been washed as much, or like eating a little bit of dirt, or eating fermented foods. Like there's, maybe you could call it like a cleansing period of some sort, where like maybe you're not going to hold on to the nutrition, the microbes that would be comfortable for you, but eventually you can't get there. I know people who've had that experience with like sauerkraut. They haven't had it at all or for a while. Like, it might go right through their body, but then maybe that's important for them. Maybe they need to experience that in order. Yeah. I definitely would say, like, when I was at Sandor's place, I was bloated for some of the time because of the amount of fermented foods I was eating, which is like, I think, a good example of like how you can overdo it. Like, you can eat too many like live cultured foods where like, most people aren't used to consuming like bowls and bowls of fermented vegetables, because it's usually like a small amount on the side. So if you're eating like a lot of fermented products, especially if they're live cultured, they could not treat you well in a way that like might not be healthy if you did that all the time.
Megan and Sean from Hex Ferments, they brought a lot of really good like habits to the table. She would make sourdough pancakes.
Oh yeah, I love doing sourdough pancakes.
Which was just, that gumminess of them, and then just all the leftovers from the night before. That was breakfast, and I'm like, that is brilliant. I love that so much.
Yeah. I actually I'm gluten intolerant, so I like just never like dove deeply into like sourdough bread, but I do keep a sourdough starter for sourdough pancakes only, which is a fun way to like use sourdough starter.
What's next for community cultures?
Yeah, so right now I'm using Oasis Community Kitchen. That's the like commissary kitchen that I'm using, and I would say one of the problems with Pittsburgh, and I think in general, is for small businesses, small producers finding like affordable kitchens. It demands scaling up to a point where I'm not comfortable in order to like sustain the business. So I'm trying to find a place that is more affordable. I would say a small number of producers luck out if they they build a relationship with a kitchen that already exists, whether that's a restaurant or a church, and they find just a great deal, whether that's free or just a very like low rent situation. So moving into a space that's more like that is something that I'm looking for. Actually, I'll be probably be working with my friend Oliver at Wild Rise Bakery at the X Factory building. So the plan is to like move into his
all the wildness.
Yeah, right. And he's doing sourdough stuff, so it would be perfect. And we've been friends for a while, so doing collaborations would work really well for us.
I'm curious what your spatial requirements are for your production, because I imagine you know there's chopping and salting and mixing and sporulating and all that. So you need an oven sometimes, but mostly you probably just need a countertop.
Right.
But then you need time. You need space for it to sit and have time.
Right.
So how does that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, the main requirements for my process is space. So I need like room temperature storage space, and then some cooler space to hold the like already fermented products that are finished. So when I'm thinking about like a dream kitchen, it's not like this big fancy place with all these ovens and everything. It's literally just shelves and a cooler and some tabletops. Like it's very simple. I don't rarely need to heat up anything. If anything, I need some like incubators that I need to create on my own. But it's pretty simple, and I think it's sad and silly that that's hard to find, especially at an affordable rate. So I think that's something that like local nonprofits and the government can definitely work on more, but I'm not gonna like rely on that to happen in order to like make a self-sustaining business. So I'm just gonna work with what I have, and I think naturally like a lot of small producers also just have to like do some things under the radar, not in the commissary kitchen, just because it's not affordable if you do everything there, even though it's not technically legal. But it's safe. I don't need that much, especially because I'm doing like pretty small batches. Yeah, like shelves and tables. And then also, like I mentioned, selling to more farmers markets. And then I'm kind of developing this, like, I started off mentioning like my seasonal approach to education products. Education, I would say, like, is more focused on the off season when people aren't growing food, but really like nailing that in so that I have like a steady revenue stream for both sides, and then developing my customer base. So I think like slow growth to the point where I can sustain myself for the products, and that might be like over the next few years just doing more farmers markets, especially when I'm developing that customer base. People know where to find me. They know that I'm the only one doing like fermented sodas on tap, that I sell out of kegs, or like small batch miso, and then doing more like collaborations and pop-ups. So just finding the places that my products do really well, and yeah, just like making sure that I'm showing up at the places where people want to consume fermented products.
So you're not looking to get into stores and...
Not necessarily. So right now, like a lot of my leftovers from the market for the sodas go to Bantha Tea Bar, and they're great because they're like very open, and I kind of have like a customer base there. Like when I walk in with my sodas and cases, people are excited, and there are customers who are just like working on their laptops who like look up and they're like, oh, what flavors do you have? Nice. And it's like, I'll bring them like just a few cases, and sometimes they sell out very quickly. So I think finding other places where I can do that, and some collaborations that are similar, it's great to have a place, honestly, that's like backup. Like, oh, like not many people showed up at the farmers market this week, and I can't necessarily hold that product to next week. Then I can just bottle it and sell it to like Bantha Tea Bar, or maybe it's a brewery or another like small retail store. Maybe, I mean, the thing about like some of my products is they are kind of priced high. I think they'd probably do better at like the East End Food Co-op.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people go in there. You could probably have more like impulse buyers there, and people look for things like fermented sodas or like live cultured products. So those are options. I think right now it's like slow and steady until I figure out like what makes the most sense and what does well. But farmers markets are pretty key for me right now, and then finding the right events to do pop-ups at.
So where can people find your product?
So Bloomfield Saturday Market, I'm a full-time vendor there. I'll be there through February and March, and then in the summer season I'll be there, May through November. And then usually I post if I have any leftovers. I go to Bantha Tea Bar. I also do porch pickups and occasionally deliveries if people request it.
So right now, bring your full range of product there. So is there miso and all that too?
Yeah. So the miso is kind of because it's so small batch. I don't consistently have miso, but when I have it available, it can be found there. I almost always have fermented veggies and other condiments available too. Different koji products, mainly shio koji, and an array of fermented vegetables. And I usually try to do more interesting kind of seasonal flavors. There are a couple other people who make sauerkraut, so I'm trying not to just mimic what other people are doing.
There are quite a few pickle places there, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And then you've got the kimchi.
Right. Yeah. So now that there's a kimchi vendor, I'm trying to do less kimchi. Have the Korean business focus on kimchi. I'm happy to step back from that. But every now and then, because of just finding myself swimming in Napa cabbage, I'll naturally make kimchi because it makes the most sense.
Oh, what problems you have. Swimming in Napa cabbage.
Right. If somebody I think it was B. Wilder, they just had it was kind of the leftover crop at the end of the season. So I was able to just turn that into some kimchi. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So they're I think building those relationships with farms too is also an important next step, to just make sure that I have clear communication, and if anyone has too much of one ingredient, they can offer it to me or reach out to me. So developing those relationships with local growers and vendors, and knowing the best spots for foraging too. So
what do you forage for?
So service berries, pawpaws, sometimes apples, sometimes different herbs and flowers. I use a lot of herbs in my sodas, most of which I get from cutting root. But I do like to go out and get my own when I can. And I also just love being out in nature, and if I can forage it, even if I know I'm going to be spending more time doing that and lose a little bit of money, I'd rather do that sometimes than source it directly from a farm.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
So people can find you at farmers markets and on the internet. You want to, right?
Yeah, so you can't buy my products on the internet, but I do post about all the workshops I teach on the internet. So my website is communitycultures.com. I have an Instagram at communitycultures, also on Facebook, but I mostly post on Instagram. And then I do have a newsletter too if people want to stay in touch with what's happening. I don't send out that many emails. It's usually just what's coming up, and random fermentation musings as far as what I'm experimenting with, and any trips or fun products I'm messing around with.
Cool.
Yeah.
How long do you ferment your miso? How long do you age your miso?
So because I'm just starting this, I have a kind of a range. I've sold some that is only fermented for 3 months. I've sold another miso batch that was a year, and then right now I have another batch that is a 2-year miso.
I would like to reserve a container of that.
Of the 2 year? Yeah. Oh yeah, that's going to be special stuff. And usually, especially the kind of the specialty longer age products, those will fly out much more quickly, and often don't last more than 2 weekends. So I think that's a good problem to have, but also means that I should make larger batches.
I have thought about, ever since that workshop, I thought, I need to do this, and I actually have in my freezer, I guess spores or whatever. And I just never did it. Never got around to doing it. Now I would totally forget. But
right.
Wanted to do that. And you just can't. I mean, the stuff in the store is not the same.
Right. I agree. Yeah. I mean, I think that can be the hard thing with fermentation, especially when there are so many different products you can make. And when you get excited about it, you have all these ingredients and you're like, what do I make? How much time do I have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then waiting for it.
Right.
Putting it away,
being patient.
Yeah.
Putting it somewhere where you can kind of forget about it, so you don't
but
eat
then
it
put
too
a
soon.
note on your calendar to check in 2 years.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Just
forgetting
forget
about it can definitely be a problem.
Like Sandor did, we found that crock. Such a trip.
Yeah, that's fun. I want to have that problem Not necessarily for my business, but for my personal stash. Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else that you'd like people to know about you, your business, your experience, your food evolution, that's what I call it, that I haven't asked you about?
I guess I would say, for anyone interested in making their own fermented products, not just as a pitch to about my workshops, but starting off with fermented vegetables or kombucha, some of these more straightforward products is a great way to get into it. And from there, it kind of will help build your confidence, and you'll develop creativity on how to approach other products and preserve just about anything through fermentation. So it's a fun adventure if you're open to it. And check out my workshops if you want some direct hands-on experience on how to get into it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. No, I'm honored. Thanks for reaching out.
Everyone knows that food is cool. No secret. Eat that food with a bowl and spoon. Lick that spoon. Everyone knows that food is cool. No secret. Eat that food with a bowl and spoon. Lick that spoon. Oh.
With Bowl and Spoon is written, produced and hosted by Shelley Daniel-O'Day. Original theme song was written and performed by Paul LeBreeze and friends. You can listen to With Bowl and Spoon wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe, like, review and share. Follow us and send us questions or messages on Facebook and Instagram at With Bowl and Spoon. Thanks for listening.